All right. I have another question that's been submitted here by Dorth Arianis. And I will read it out loud real quick and paste it into the chat for you. It says, It says, do you think the episodes in History of Science show that propositions were thought to be known a priori and came to be rationally revised in the light of experience in reference to Quine's indeterminacy arguments?
Well, they got fragments of it. Can you write it out?
I sure can. Just one moment. I will just paste this into the chat real quick.
Propositions that were thought to be known a priori can be rationally revised in the light of experience. Well, there have been such cases. Quine's indeterminacy arguments don't seem to me to have any force. I was a student of Quine's. We argued about this a lot in the 1950s. There's a good deal in print of our discussions about them. As far as I can see, the indeterminacy arguments simply reduce to inductive uncertainty. I can't see any further evidence, any further indeterminacy argument. Quine has offered some, but they don't seem to be valid. In fact, Quine has an interesting article that you might want to take a look at. 1969. It's in the New York University Symposia on Philosophy of Science. There was a symposium on language. Quine took part, I took part, a couple of others. And Quine's paper in that symposium, I think, is worth reading. What he says there is that there's an enormous gap between stimulation, data available, and knowledge obtained. And we have to be willing to accept whatever innate structures there are that are needed to explain the transition across that gap. Well, as far as I can see, that throws away everything. I don't see what remains of indeterminacy, the problems about reference, anything else. Well, read the article and see what you think.
All right. Definitely, I think that question. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that question definitely got answered for sure. I have my own question here. I'll paste it into the chat for you. What are your thoughts in regards to the police response to the Uvalde shooting, and how can we improve our response from the parties involved?
The response to the Uvalde shooting is not to allow it to happen. Are there other countries where schools have to be fortified to protect the children from shooters? Are there other countries where teachers have to be armed, where campgrounds have to be patrolled by the 82nd Airborne to make sure that campers won't be shot? I mean, this is a specific U.S. pathology, and a pretty recent one, incidentally. The Wild shooting is just a plague that has expanded over the United States. It was always a little off the spectrum, but now it's totally different. As for the police response, well, the press has done as much as I can say. It is kind of amazing that lots of police officers were around and there was no way to get in to stop the shooter. But I don't think that's the crucial question we should be asking is not how to improve police response, how to better fortify the schools, how to teach the children how to hide under desks. The best response should be to ask, can we extirpate the deep pathology in our social order that permits these things to happen, whether they're in schools or shopping malls, or as of a couple of days ago, campgrounds.
Yes, sir. That definitely is a very, very, very good response to that. I have another question here from a friend of mine in chat right now. His name is T Jump. Tom, if you want to ask him your questions, could you have them at the ready to paste into the chat real quick?
Sure.
Okay. And Tom is going to ask the question after he pastes them and paste his question into the chat.
So my question is the rule following argument irrelevant to the biological functions of language in the brain? And can a particular physical state in the brain count as a solution to the rule following argument?
I'm not sure what you mean by the rule following argument.
The rule following argument that the Foundations of Language by Wittgenstein, his rule following argument.
Oh, Wittgenstein?
Yeah.
I think Wittgenstein, first of all, he was talking about the use of language, not the nature of language. And what he argued is that when there's a rule, there's never any independent evidence about how to follow it. So to take his example, if you see an arrow pointing, you see what I can't draw it, but a line with the arrowhead here, you know what I mean. You don't know whether that means go in the direction of the arrowhead or the opposite direction. And he extended this argument to language. He said if there's a rule that says a plural noun should have a plural verb, you don't know whether that's what the rule says or whether it means something else. And the only way you know, he said, is by general social conformity. This is wrong on all counts. The arrow, we have an instinctive bias towards going in the direction of the arrowhead. Could easily be proven by experiment. I imagine that dogs have the same instinct. It's never been tested. But that's surely an instinctive bias. It's not something we follow by social convention. It's not like stopping at a red light. Stopping at a red light, that's social convention, but not going in the direction of an arrow. And there's nothing difficult to understand about stopping at a red light. Yes, it's laid down as social convention. You don't have to follow it. A lot of people don't follow it. Sometimes they get arrested. But if you want to conform to the social norms, you conform to them, period. No philosophical issue. As far as the rules of language are concerned, they're not social conventions. A 2-year-old infant isn't following social conventions. These grow out of our internal nature. They're there because that's the kind of creature we are. To some extent, there's a convention. Like, do you call this thing over here a cat or a cot, let's say, as in German? Well, that's a social convention. But that's like stopping at a red light, perfectly transparent. So I don't think there are any cases of the Wittgenstein or Crippy character. They just don't arise.
All right. I have a question here that I'm going to paste in the chat as well. And it says, Dr. Chomsky, it seems recently to me, well, I'll just paste this real quick and then read it off. It seems to me as if recently what used to be genuine pursuits for the execution of social justice have been co-opted and taken to extremes by reactionaries. What can we do in regards to promoting a more patient society that listens to receive rather than listening to react on impulse?
There are old answers, the only ones we know. The answers are education, organization, mutual interchange, trying to raise the level of civilization. Can be done. can be done in lots of ways. So, for example, if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, there were forms of human interaction that were considered quite appropriate that would be absolutely intolerable today. We just can't do those things because the level of civilization has been increased by activism, concern for rights of people who were not thought to have rights, concern for women's rights, which is totally different from what it was 60 years ago. Rights of Afro-Americans understood at a level which was never understood before. Well, that's how you improve society. There's no magic key. It takes a lot of work, just as was done by activists of the 60s and their aftermath. Hard work goes on right now. Many struggles about that today. But there's no magic keys, just hard, engaged work.
Okay. Thank you again for that. It says that for some reason we have five minutes or so left. I tried to make somebody else the host that had premium to where we could come right back to it. But I'm not sure if that's working or not. So if the video disconnects, then that's what happened. But I'm going to try to ask some more questions here. It says, do you think the Supreme Court, in lights of your thoughts on the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, what are the next steps you expect to see from the American population in regards to that?
Well, we can have a fairly good guess about what the Supreme Court has in mind. Justice Thomas informed us about it in his concurring opinion. He said we have to go on to look at a series of cases. If you look at those cases, they concern the right to contraception, the right to choice of sex partner, and same-sex marriage. Those are the three things that Thomas said we have to proceed to look at next and probably overturn. The court is now in the hands of basically Catholic reactionaries. There is a deeply reactionary strain in Catholic culture. It's been sort of internal to Catholic debate recently, but the current majority of the justices come out of that movement. And that's the strict moral system that they want to impose on the country. It'll now be even more extreme with Coney Barrett, who comes straight out of that tradition, who's never been out of it. Well, that's a way they're imposing their deeply coercive system of moral rules on the country. The country's opposed. You look at polls, there's strong opposition, but the court does what it likes. That's been true throughout a lot of American history. If you look at the record of the court, it's mostly been a pretty reactionary institution trying to prevent social change, social moral advance, and so on. So this is not an aberration. It's also been long in the planning. There's been a long effort. Mitch McConnell's been involved, many others, plenty of money behind it, to try to convert the whole federal judiciary into a far-right institution where